These two former Oura employees and advisors revealed a lot of information about how the company is actually calculating your sleep and activity scores in this new paper. I actually treat sleep disorders in my practice, so this information is really important to me and my patients. One of the biggest hurdles to overcome with the ring sensor is that the biological signals of your finger are going to lag behind the sleep stages that you are going through. What annoys me about most of these Oura Ring reviews on YouTube is that they are so superficial. They talk about the chargers, the size of the ring. They never actually do a deep dive on how these rings are actually getting the data on a physiological and sensor standpoint, and how that data is being tweaked by the company through machine learning techniques that can create weak points in the sleep reports that Oura Ring users should know about. Now, it's known that as you drift off to sleep, you move less, your heart rate slows down, there's changes in your heart rate variability, and your temperature drops by a few degrees. But some stages of sleep are more difficult to detect than others because these biosignals of your body have a less degree of change from baseline levels when you are awake to that stage of sleep. One of the most difficult stages to measure is right when you are falling asleep into light non-REM at the beginning of the night, because your body's biosignals have not changed that much compared to your brainwaves that are slowing down into the first stage of sleep. This is why peripheral trackers have a reputation for not being able to accurately measure something called sleep latency, which is the amount of time that it takes to fall asleep. Like this article here that states that they can be as low as 38% accurate in that metric. The best way to detect someone drifting off to sleep is to actually measure the slowing of their brainwaves with an EEG device. But if you have to measure from the body, you can measure different biosignals that follow along the changes of the brain, but with a bit of a time lag. The Ring is using an accelerometer to measure its position in 3D space. It has infrared and red lasers and sensors to detect your heartbeat, and it has temperature sensors. The stage that's often easiest to measure for peripheral trackers is the next stage of deep non-REM, where your temperature is the lowest and you have one of the largest differences in your heart rate variability. But challenges arise again when you go back up into REM and your body signals like HRV become more similar to your wakefulness state. All of these sleep stages are typically present in the 90-minute sleep cycles that we go throughout the night. So as we'll see, they can affect total sleep time and the ratios between these sleep stages when you are evaluating the quality of your sleep. To account for this, the Oura software engineers have tried to massage the data with machine learning techniques, as we'll see when we dive into this research paper. In the interest of time, we will really quickly go over these sleep stages to put into context why their measurements and ratios are important. If you want an excellent in-depth discussion on these, check out Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep, which is an excellent read. Basically, a 7 to 8 hour night is dominated by deep non-REM cycles at the beginning and REM cycles later in the night and early morning. Deep non-REM is where your brainwaves slow way down so that short-term memories can be stored as long-term memories and useless details about the day can be forgotten. REM is where your brainwaves rev back up in frequency for dreaming. This serves to process emotions from the day and make random associations between facts or events for creative problem solving. Each stage is really important for the learning process, so a deficit in any one of them is not good. So when Oura consistently tells me that I'm not getting enough REM for my creativity, but the Muse headband EEG sensor is telling me that I have enough, that's concerning to me. So let's dive deep into this paper and see how and why Oura might miss the mark at times. It turns out from their research that using the accelerometer was only 57% accurate in determining sleep stages. If you added the temperature changes that happen in the body throughout the night, that improved the machine learning algorithm up to 60%. Then they got a big boost from heart rate and HRV data that got them up to 76%. That's pretty good if you consider the fact that the gold standard of sleep measurement, polysomnography, has about an 83% agreement rate between tests. Now, to get some last few percentage points, Oura, by their own admission, has massaged the data a little bit. So they added an extra piece of information that does not come from actual sensor data, but is modeled on how our sleep patterns are naturally shaped in the circadian rhythm. They call this sensor-independent circadian features. A big part of this data massaging was letting the algorithm know that it should focus on non-REM signals in the early part of the night and REM signals more in the later part of the night. By knowing what to look for and how to weigh different parameters, they were actually able to increase the accuracy up to 79%. They don't say it specifically in this paper, but I think that they are trying to correct for the beginning and later stages of sleep that are the most difficult to measure with a peripheral sensor. Now, I would rather them do this because it did improve the accuracy. It's really more of a data massaging than a straight up manipulation. I don't think that they had any type of malintent here, but I think that it's important as an Oura user to understand that this is happening. And if you're like me and your REM scores or total sleep time are weird and not matching with your experience, these concerns might be validated. Despite all the data analytics and massaging, the Ring still has a hard time knowing exactly when you fall asleep because of the small physiological difference between wakefulness and light sleep, and later into the early morning when the active state of REM is more close to the physiology of wakefulness state. Now, this is the problem that I see from my end. Oura seems to consistently underreport the amount of time asleep and REM sleep for me. I know this because I've been tracking my sleep with EEG, like the Muse headband, which recently validated its data against the gold standard. I will say that Oura is maximizing the peripheral physiological data because it is closer to Muse in sleep measurements than the Whoop band, for example. One of the best examples I have is testing it in both extreme and regular circumstances. In September, I took an overnight flight from Las Vegas to Miami and tracked my brainwaves while I had both the Oura and Whoop on. During that flight, I fell asleep several times, and Muse specifically tracked two 30-minute periods at the beginning and end of the flight with two brief 5-minute periods of light sleep in between. You can actually see in the middle of the flight when I was awake because I remember that there was a baby that was crying that kept me up and food service came by. Predictably, the Oura and Whoop had a lot of trouble reporting the sleep in extreme circumstances because I was sitting up, my heart rate and my skin temperature probably didn't do the normal changes when you are lying flat in a bed at home when you sleep. I mean, apparently your brainwaves still slow down as you fall asleep on a plane, which made Muse the most accurate in tracking in that extreme environment by far. Still, the Oura was able to detect what it called a 2-hour nap and gave me 24 sleep points for it, but Whoop didn't record any sleep on that flight at all. Then when we got to our destination in the Caribbean, that first full night of sleep was informative as well. Muse reported my time in bed that night as 8 hours and 42 minutes, while my time asleep was 8 hours and 24 minutes. The Whoop reported time in bed as 8 hours and 4 minutes and only gave me 6 hours and 50 minutes of time asleep. Oura did report more closely to Muse on this night with 8 hours and 41 minutes total time in bed, but a sleep time of 7 hours and 7 minutes. The Oura was still pretty far off from the Muse, but definitely better than the Whoop in recording total sleep time. And this is pretty consistent to other nights that I've tracked at home over the last 3 months, where the peripheral sensors tend to underreport total sleep time and REM while overestimating sleep latency times. Part of my issue might be that I go to bed earlier and get up earlier than most of the general population, with going to bed at 8:15 p.m. and getting up at 4:15 a.m. on average. I do wonder if the artificial sensor-independent circadian feature part of the Oura algorithm thinks that I don't get enough REM at the end of the night because I get up so early. And if you add that to a prolonged sleep latency time from peripheral sensor challenges, the algorithm could think that I need to be sleeping later into the morning. Now, in regards to the Oura readiness scores, they are factoring in all these sleep factors, so that certainly could be off a bit with Oura as well. I can go to bed at 8 p.m. and it still wants me to sleep until 5:30. Which is 9.5 hours of sleep. I don't have time for that. And also, I tend to wake up at 4:30 a.m. wide awake and bursting with energy and ideas. I know I'm weird. But what do? Do I force myself back asleep to meet the Oura standards? I mean, maybe I should sleep in on the weekend more, but the Muse EEG seems to give me more points for that amount of sleep, so I do feel better about the Muse scores when I wake up. But I will say that I tend to crash at 6 p.m. at night, so maybe Oura's onto something. I do admire their openness to publishing papers with their sleep algorithm designs to further the science, and I fully recognize that they are constantly improving. Even while making this video, there were some firmware updates that seemed to improve my REM scores and sleep times over the past 4 days without me really making any changes to my regimen, so we'll see if that trend continues. Regardless, it is important to understand where this data is coming from so that we can make our own individual lifestyle choices in relation to the data. Overall, I really like the Oura, and I'm enjoying seeing its data coming in as the Ring learns more about me through machine learning. It's definitely the easiest of the wearables to wear, which is a huge plus. If you want to try one out, there is a link in the description to help support this channel. And if you want to see me testing Muse versus Whoop versus Oura over a 3-month period that included overnight travel, check this video out over here, and I'll see you on the other side.